What happens when a hot-headed Tudor nobleman takes justice into his own hands? Well, he ends up on the gallows. I'm Claire Ridgway, historian, author and founder of the Anne Boleyn Files, and welcome to another episode in my Tudor True Crime series. Today I'm delving into the dark and disturbing case of Charles Stourton, 8th Baron Stourton, a man with a fearsome temper, a long-running feud and a murderous plan that would lead him to the hangman's noose. He was a peer of the realm, connected to the mighty Dudley family, but his downfall came not from politics or plots against the crown, but from a personal vendetta that spiralled into violence and cold-blooded murder. So what pushed Lord Stourton over the edge, and how did a supposed act of reconciliation turn into a brutal double killing? Let's take a look. Charles Stourton was born in around 1520 and was the eldest son of William Stourton, 7th Baron Stourton, and his wife Elizabeth Dudley. His mother was the daughter of Edmund Dudley, who'd served as one of Henry VII's main advisors and who was executed following the accession of Henry VIII as a scapegoat for his father's unpopular financial policies. This made Charles Stourton a nephew of John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, a powerful man. Charles's parents had a rather unhappy marriage, and his father eventually separated from Charles's mother and brought his mistress, Agnes Rice, daughter of Rhys ap Griffith and Lady Catherine Howard, to live in the family home. They went on to have a daughter also called Agnes. This scandalous behaviour obviously caused upset, with Charles quarrelling with his father and branding him a false hypocrite. But things became worse in 1548, when, just a few days before his death, the 7th Baron changed his will, leaving the bulk of his estates not to Charles, but to Agnes. This resulted in years of litigation between Charles and his stepmother. I'm sure all of that made Stourton, who was now the 8th Baron, incredibly grumpy. But how did things go from this to murder? And who was his victim? Well, there were actually two victims, William Hartgill and his son John. Stourton's father, a skilled military commander who'd secured the king's favour after serving him loyally in the 1540s in his French and Scottish campaigns, had been able to purchase former monastic lands and properties, including the neighbouring manor of Kilmington, of which William Hartgill was a tenant. As he was away fighting a lot, the Baron had appointed William Hartgill as his steward to oversee his lands and properties. However, in 1548, not long before he died, the Baron accused Hartgill of seeking your own gain more than my commodity and honour. While the cat's away, the mice will play, is the saying, and Hartgill appears to have taken some of the Baron's properties for himself while the Baron was away. And Hartgill wasn't a nice guy. He too had a reputation in the area for bad behaviour. Sometime following the death of the 7th Baron, Charles Stourton, the new 8th Baron, visited Hartgill at Kilmington. According to John Strype, Stourton's mother Elizabeth was staying with Hartgill at Kilmington, and Stourton wanted his mother to enter into a bond with him in a great sum of money that she should never remarry. Elizabeth wasn't happy with the deal, and Hartgill refused to support it unless Stourton would assign a yearly payment for Elizabeth to live on. This led to the two men falling out, and at Whitsun 1550, Stourton and a great many men with bows and guns went to Kilmington Church and waited for Hartgill. Hartgill's son John arrived at the church door, saw what was going on, drew his sword, and then ran to alert his father's house being next to the churchyard. As he ran, Stourton and his men shot arrows at him, but he managed to reach his father uninjured. William Hartgill and his wife, who Strype describes as old folks, managed to get up into the church tower with 2 or 3 servants, while John armed himself with his longbow and arrows and gave a woman a crossbow and gun with orders to follow him. The older Hartgills became under siege in the tower, but John was fortunately able to drive off Stourton and his men. Then, under his father's orders, John rode to the royal court to report what had happened to the King's Council. The High Sheriff of Somerset was sent to apprehend Stourton and free the Hartgills, who'd been surrounded once more. The Stourton gang also took Hartgill's horse and killed it with a crossbow. Stourton was taken to London and imprisoned in the Fleet, but not for long. Strype records that the said Lord Stourton continued his malice still during all King Edward's reign, and with violence and force took from the said William Hartgill all the corn and cattle that he could any way come by, which were the said Hartgills. Strype goes on to say that on Mary I's succession, William and John Hartgill made humble suit to the Queen and her council for some redress. As a result of that, the council called Stourton and Hartgill before them, where Stourton, and I quote, promised that if the said William Hartgill and his son would come home to his house and desire his goodwill, they should not only have it, but also be restored to their goods and cattle that he had of theirs. The Hartgills, accompanied by a man, Jack Dacombe, chosen by them to be a witness to their submission to Stourton, did indeed make their way to Stourton House. But in the lane near the house, half a dozen of Stourton's men set upon John Hartgill, wounding him in the hand, body and legs and leaving him for dead. He came round after about half an hour and then rode to the home of a local gentleman, and the case, as Strype writes, then became Star Chamber business. Charles Stourton was fined with the money due to the Hartgills, and he was imprisoned once more in the Fleet, although he was released under a recognizance for £2,000 so that he could return home and pay the Hartgills. He then set about arranging a meeting with the Hartgills, who finally agreed that they would meet him on the 11th of January 1557 at Kilmington Church. Stourton arrived accompanied by 15 or 16 servants plus tenants and gentlemen, bringing the total number of men in his party to about 60. He then sent a message to the Hartgills saying that it wasn't appropriate to talk about worldly matters in the church and that the church house was a much better place. The Hartgills refused to meet with him inside, so a table was set up on the green on which Stourton laid his purse as if he was getting ready to pay them. Then he called them to him, but instead of paying them, he ordered his men to arrest them on a charge of felony. They were thrown violently into the church house, where Stourton then confiscated their purses. Then, as he left the building, Stourton attacked John Hartgill's wife, kicking her with his spurs and striking her on the neck with his sword so badly that it was thought that she'd die. The Hartgills were then tied up, confined to the parsonage and denied anything to eat or drink, before being taken in the early hours of Tuesday to another Stourton property. There, Stourton sent 2 justices of the peace to examine them. The justices ordered that the Hartgills should be untied, but they were tied up again as soon as the justices left. It was all a pretence of justice. That night, Stourton ordered 4 of his men, William Farr, Roger Goth, John Welshman and MacCute Jacob, to take the Hartgills to a close near Stourton House. There they were attacked with 2 clubs, being beaten around the head until they were thought to be dead. When it was found that they were still alive, Farr cut their throats while his master watched holding a candle. A pit was then dug in the cellar of the house and the bodies buried, layers of earth, thick paving, wood shavings and chippings being added on top. But someone must have blabbed, for Sheriff Sir Anthony Hungerford was sent to exhume the Hartgills. On the 28th of January 1557, Stourton was committed to the Tower of London and the apprehension of his servants was ordered. Roger Goth had fled to Wales, but all 4 were eventually caught. Stourton was indicted on the 19th of February at an inquisition held at New Sarum, and then on the 26th of February he was tried by a jury of his peers at Westminster Hall. There he refused to plead until he was threatened with being pressed to death. He finally stated that he could not say that he was not guilty. He acknowledged his crimes and threw himself upon the mercy of the King and Queen. He was then found guilty and sentenced to be hanged. His 4 servants were tried in Wiltshire and also found guilty and sentenced to death. On the 6th of March 1557, Stourton was taken to the marketplace at Salisbury, where, according to Strype, he made great lamentation at his death for his wilful and impious deeds. His servants were later hanged in chains. Stourton was survived by his wife Anne, daughter of Edward Stanley, 3rd Earl of Derby, and Lady Dorothy Howard, with whom he'd had 3 sons and 3 daughters. His eldest son John inherited his title. So there you have it, the grim tale of Charles Stourton, a Tudor lord who allowed rage, pride and vengeance to override duty, law and basic humanity. And he paid for it. A peer of the realm hanged like a common criminal, and rightly so. Thank you for joining me for this chilling dive into Tudor true crime. If you found it fascinating, do give it a like, leave me a comment with your thoughts on Stourton's downfall, and don't forget to subscribe for more dark and dramatic stories from Tudor history. Until next time, please take care and be thankful your neighbours aren't Tudor barons with a huge grudge. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.